Welcome to today's very special webinar. We are absolutely honored to present this program to you today. We are joined by Lance Corporal Thomas Begay, one of the few remaining Navajo Code Talkers who has an incredible story of service and someone to whom we owe a great debt. And you'll hear more from him and about him in just a couple of moments. But before we do, my name is Samuel Holliday, and I have the great privilege of serving as Director of Operations and Scholarship for the United States Capitol Historical Society. And one of the things we love about using this Zoom webinar platform to engage with you nationwide and worldwide is that you can send in questions for these incredible people we get to speak with on a regular basis as part of this public history program. So as you have questions for Lance Corporal Begay or for Patty Talahongva, our wonderful co-panelist as well, please put those into the Q&A section of the webinar platform. That looks like two speech bubbles either at the top or bottom of your screen so that Jane can read them to our fantastic panelists throughout today's program. Now, if you have any technical difficulties, you can put those sorts of matters into the chat section of the webinar, which I will be responding to in real time. But once again, any content questions for our amazing panel, please put those into the Q&A section of the webinar. It's now also my great pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of the United States Capitol Historical Society, Jane Campbell, to start and moderate today's program. Jane?
Thank you very much, Sam. We appreciate your work to pull this off, and we also are very happy to have the work behind the scenes of Yanni Varanis, who is our communications director. Today, we have an incredible privilege. We are hosting this special webinar as our celebration of Veterans Day and of the National Native American Heritage Month. During World War II, the United States Armed Forces sought an unbreakable code to win the war and save democracy. In order to achieve this, the Marine Corps recruited American Indians whose native tongues became one of the keys to victory at the Battle of Iwo Jima over Japan and the Axis powers. We are honored to welcome World War II and Korean War veteran Lance Corporal Thomas Begay, one of 3 living Navajo Code Talkers. Mr. Begay is 98 years young, joining us today, and we are also honored to welcome to the stage later in the program Patty Talahongva, who produced the documentary film, The Power of Words, Native Languages as Weapons of War. This distinguished Hopi journalist works with us and also did that documentary just for the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. And so as we start our program, Lance Corporal Begay, we bring to you a distinguished individual who enlisted in the United States Marine at the ripe old age of 16, fought on the front lines of Iwo Jima at the age of 18, became a replacement for a code talker who was killed in action. Years later, Lance Corporal Begay fought during the Korean War and survived the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, arguably the most brutal battle in American history. For his contributions to the nation's freedom, Lance Corporal Begay is the recipient of the Congressional Silver Medal and is in no uncertain terms a hero. You may see from time to time his distinguished son, Ronald C. Begay, who is helping with technical matters. And so you'll see the gentle guiding hand of his son, Ronald, who is also a veteran. As a matter of fact, every one of Mr. Begay's 4 children served America. Lance Corporal Begay, thank you for being with us. Tell us your story.
Cut. Oh, shucks. My name is Thomas H. Begay, from south of Lupton. It's by the New Mexico-Arizona state line, about 15 miles south. I had to walk to the bus station in Lupton to catch a bus to Gallup to enlist and all the necessary documents. And the bus cost on Greyhound is 25 cents. So it was easy for me to get to Gallup and back and then walk home. So I did a lot, because one of the reasons what made me did things, seek employment, was during the summer. During the summer, our family go out and look for work and find employment until school starts. In 1942, I did that. We did that with the family. Men go out and seek employment wherever they can find. So the summer of 1942, I went out to Apache country and seek job using axe to chop branches of pine that are sawed down and put it on a little pile. And they were 15 cents a tree. You do a lot of chopping before you get the whole tree branch and put it in pile, in small piles, so they can burn that during the winter time when it's snow. Anyway, we did that, so I did the same thing to Flagstaff, ordinance depot, and people, they wouldn't hire me. They say I'm too young. He didn't even ask my birthday or anything, but he just thinking that I'm 15, I'm too young to work at the ordinance depot. There were lots of jobs. People were sleeping under pine trees and go to work, and they cook outside, coffee, whatever they cook. There was some wood there for fire, but they're very careful, and there are a lot of people working. Those that cannot speak English, it didn't matter, they hire. So I sick there, and they wouldn't hire me, and I really hard for me. I couldn't get a job. So when I got home, when my parents came to Flagstaff for the fair, we just went back home, and then I started sicking. I was so mad, or whatever you call it. So I started enlisting Marine Corps. I wanted to be a gunner. There's nothing about Navajo Code Talker. There's no information, nothing, which I didn't know. But I guess on reservation, the Marine Code recruit Navajos for a Code Talker program, that they use the language in the Marine Corps, which I didn't know. In New Mexico, recruiter, he didn't say anything about it, but I enlisted to be a aerial tail gunner for airplane. They said I was qualified and processed me, got into Marine Corps, physical sent me to San Diego in 1943. Didn't tell me nothing. Nobody told me anything, Marine Corps. Of course, there was no Navajo recruiter or anything at San Diego. I just went boot camp with the group 789, 1943. September, October, November, I believe. No, September. And October, I finished. Then I thought they sent me out to gunnery school for what I signed for. Here they sent me to Camp Pendleton in a truck, ton and a two and a half ton truck. And they dropped me off at restricted area, he says. So I walk in the barracks. I thought that's where the gunnery school started. Then I found out there was a Marine Sergeant Navajo met me and told me that I was in Code Talker school. And every Navajo that enlists, finish boot camp they go through, whether they like it or not, they go through Code Talker school. It was hard for some, but it was easy for me because out of 100, about 15 Navajos drop out. They couldn't comprehend and they couldn't learn the code. So that's what I had to do to learn code. And I told them, I signed to be aerial gunner and I want to go to gunnery school. He said, too bad you're here. You're Navajo? You speak Navajo? Yes, sir. He said, you are a Navajo Code Talker school. And we're going to teach you the code. So I had no choice. There's no way. He said, you get a court martial. If you run off, if you refuse disobey order, you lose your PFC stripe. You get all kind of threatening, court martial, going to jail and all that stuff. I really didn't enlist for that. I just wanted aerial gunner, but they refused to let me go. Aerial gunner school. But I went and they gave me a list of ABC. I viewed it and then it was very simple to me because I knew Navajo. I grew up as a Navajo. I had not too much of a schooling, but I learned everything. ABC is alphabet. Letter A, Walachi, which means red ant. So I went down the line. Letter B is a bear. Letter C is a cat. On down the line, all the way down to letter J, it says Kelly Chucky. That means jackass in Navajo. I kind of laughed. You know, it was funny to me that they're using those kind of, you know, they're making a code. So we all developed the code during the training. At the same time, we make new word and put into a code. Different kind, like a turtle, which was tank. things like that. Transport airplane is gagi, which means crow. Eagle is a plane that carries people. Dive bomber, and all that. Guinea, we call it as a chicken hawk. And A, B, C, A to Z. It wasn't hard for me. I comprehended right away. I caught on. So I didn't have much time to finish. Plus, I knew at boarding school, I was on Boy Scout. We learned Morse code at the Boy Scout during the summer camp. And when they test me, I pass a radio operator using Morse code. All that stuff. So they already gave me MOS right away. It's military special that I knew Morse code. I can be Anglo Filipino radio operator, which means white man radio operator. More using the Morse code. So I was familiar with it. So they gave me credit right away. They gave me a military occupation number. So anyway, that's one of the ways they train. Plus, they climb a pole, put the wire on the pole, and telephone. They call it WE8 telephone line. You hook it up, and they use telephone. There's different radio. There's a couple of different radios. So we learn all that stuff and the word and additional word we put together, and then they use that new word into a code. So people say certain people only, they're the first code mate, but we all did make the code. That's where the Navajo got their hang up. They say the first group was, they made the code and they gave him gold. And those of us combat Navajo Code Talker, we were under fire. That Code Talker were killed by mortar, artillery, machine gun, sniper. It's awful in being in a combat. Anything you get hit with because you carry a radio and you try very hard to hide yourself in combat area. I have combat experience of Jima. So anyway, I finished training. We also use Singapore blinker. The Navy uses that a lot, and also Singapore. So we had to learn all the communication panel for the airplane to see. You use cloth, sent messages. So those are a lot of things we learned, not just a few. Plus we made the code, additional code, add on, which was used all in combat by us. We use it in combat. We didn't carry no cookbook at all. They back in headquarters, wherever we are, was used to station. They code is only used on training. In combat, they don't carry a code book or anything like that. So everything's out there by memory. We practice training, a lot of things too. There's a couple radio, 3 radio we use. One is SER 300, the other one is TBX. Another one is TBY, which you can carry, Navy radio. And TBX, a Navy radio, is with a generator you crank, and you send messages while you're in the foxhole to the headquarters, and you send messages of what's going on at the time of combat. It's bad. Anytime the motor comes down sometime without being noticed, sniper are around. No matter how much security they had, sometimes the sniper come out from the ground. There's tunnel or underground. So there's other things. There's mine, when you might step on it and blow yourself up. The motor just comes down. No matter where you are, it blows up. It's a real bad one because many people got hit. One of the Code Talkers was killed by a motor. They couldn't stop the bleeding, the injury, so they just had to let go. Gone. So all kinds of things happen in combat. No matter how you try to hide, there are always ways the enemy is looking at you somewhere, from somewhere. Sniper, mortar, artillery, machine gun. Sometimes the enemy all pop up in the middle of the camp, come from the whole cave. It's awful in combat. It's bad, bad, bad. There's no safe anywhere. You have to watch out. But if you're lucky, you make it through. If not, well, that's it. Anyway, I was talking about the training. During the, we left 5th Division was formed on November the 11th on 44. No, 40. Yeah, 44, no, 43. In November, 11th Infantry Division, Marine Corps, 11 with the B, the patch right here. Yeah, Code Talker patches on this side. This is the history of Navajo. That's the patch, and this is the 5th Marine Division, which we were assigned. I was assigned the Signal Company radio platoon. There were 5 of us: Sergeant Menolito, Wilson Price, Merrill Sandoval, and a guy from Fruitland, Freeland Nash, and PFC, Thomas H. Begay, which is me. Lieutenant Castle was a commanding officer, and the commanding officer were Major Connor, which was responsible for all communication in Marine Corps, CWO, voice message, communication. He is responsible for it, so he has radio, everything. And when somebody gets killed, radio, they ask for another one. That's what they did to me. Paul Kellicini was killed on Eagle on Red Beach too. And one of the Code Talkers was wounded. The other one in that area was killed. So it was a sad thing that they had to call headquarters, my communicating officer, Major Connor. And somebody came down from the headquarters and took me back, walked me back to the headquarters where Paul was killed and the other Code Talker was wounded and the other one was killed, so I had to replace them. So I had to stay with them until about 38 days on Iwo Jima. I spent the longest from a signal company. The other radio operator, Code Talker, they went back, I guess, aboard ship earlier. But we were the last one on the northeast side of the Iwo Jima. That's where we were located. It was an infantry unit. So our last unit stopped aboard on March 23rd. No, 34. March 34. As we board a smaller boat and took us out to the big ship, USS Storm King. We were loading up. I was being assigned down in the hold, situated from my butt. It's just a little canvas in a frame. You stack up bed and bedroom and one dining room and different room, different time you go there. So that's one of the things you do. Like when we're going off landing, they got us 2 o'clock in the morning, February 19th. That's ready, they said. They announced, they said, get your last breakfast, steak and eggs. You feel awful, terrible to think, what do they mean? You gonna die? Maybe you live. You don't know. So you just go down and eat. Sometimes you don't feel like eating when they say that. Go down, load up. Then they start landing. When they clear the beach, D-Day. They set the date 9 o'clock, 0900. February 19th, D-Day. And that's the day you land. While you float, you're okay. You got your pack, you got your bullet, you got your weapon, rifle. In the Marine Corps, you don't say gun. They kind of sort of like punish you if you say. You're not allowed to say gun. Rifle, that's what you call. Never say gun in Marine Corps. They know who you are, so never say that. Gun, you say rifle, weapon, M1, harping, all that stuff. So when I landed on the beach, February 19, we set up communication. And then later on, the commanding general, Major General Kelly Iraqi, standing, I'm right here. Thomas H. Begay, POC, before I went to resign to Red Beach 2. It's where the infantry are, headquarters, there's a colonel there. He's responsible for all the regiment, the whole regiment, colonel. And his assistant is lieutenant colonel, all officers. So that's where you stay, that's where you communicate down to the general. Wherever you are, you always have your radio check, ready to give out messages. So we sent messages in Navajo all during that period, close to 800 messages. So you were scared, but there's nothing you can do about it. You're just scared. At night, you just sit up and sleep in foxhole. But some foxhole, I guess, they're bigger, but I didn't see anybody have a big foxhole. There's just enough in the hole where you have your radio, your backpack would be on top of the foxhole. So you sit in the foxhole, you set up radio in the foxhole. So that's how the combat situation. And then the other individual, the radio operator, communication, if they finish their job, I guess they go back to the ship. They set up all that, and just a minimum type of security and the crew on the island. But us, our whole bodies on the on the island, we had the radio operator, code talker. So we used Navajo for many hours, many messages were sent. I think Major Connor said something like, well, 800 messages, 48 hours during the landing, and set up the headquarters. In the meantime, there's a wounded, deceased Marine on the beach, and they have a little grave where they buried. All they did is dig a hole like this. Lay body like this, and bulldozers just covered them. They put cross on it. So that's how they don't have much time on the island. They just made them in time, I guess, because of some bullet. Sometimes the sniper comes, sometimes they come from the ground. So that's how the combat. So I'm saying that Native people, a lot of the combat code talkers, every one of them got gold, except Navajo. I really don't understand what happened, but only a few Navajo got gold. They say that they made the code. How about us, those that made the code? Yeah, we made the code. So I'm seeking gold. Write to your congressman, leader, military organization to help us. We want our gold yet. Navajo haven't had their gold. I haven't got mine because even though I'm a combat and my buddy's combat killing in action, Paul Kennedy. There's other Navajo that kill in combat. They don't even give them gold. Other tribes throughout the nation, Alaska, some senator from Colorado, native senator, they got them, every one of the native people got gold, except Navajo. The whole up is, I don't know, there's conflict. You know, some people are. You know, I feel bad because I'm a combat veteran. I don't sleep good. The combat is bad. I can't see good. A lot of things. I have not yet got my gold yet, so I'm seeking gold for all Navajo. They already had a recognition. I had to go to congressman from Arizona, and he worked with DeConcini, Senator Pete Domenici from New Mexico, and Senator Cannon from Nevada. They worked and we got recognition, national recognition. So we have a National Code Talker Day in August, the day the Japanese surrendered. So that's a national Navajo Code Talker there all over the United States. A lot of people don't recognize, but we do have senators and Congress give us National Navajo Code Talker Day. I have photograph here. Show. Right here. There's some of the information. Pakistan, Korea. And also, I'm a veteran of Korea. I couldn't get a job after World War II. There's line miles and miles. So I stick in this, I figured there's no more war. Finish. I enlisted 3 years in the Army as a paratrooper. I went through jump school, glider school, packed my own chute, all that. Learned that. I was a regular radio operator, all that stuff, what I did in the Army. Here, somehow, Korea, they sent me September. They assigned me 7th Infantry, attached to the Marine at Incheon Landing. There were no Korean tank. The smaller one, 2 of them, on the narrow road. In Korea, they have a narrow road. They were burning body over there, hanging out, burning bodies. I smelled that for about 3 months. I went right by through the smoke. It's a terrible thing, body, kill. So it was a bad, but they kept going, kept going. We ate on Chosin Reservoir when the snow came. There were bodies all over, Marine, Army, Chinese, like this. You can't pick it up, you break off the arm. That's how bad the cold was. So I have frostbite. That's some of the bad stuff what happened in the war. I was forward observer with the officer sent messages for him to commanding general. So I ended up in another war, and I tell you, I felt so bad. I should have stayed home. Just stand on the street, collect money, which I didn't want to do. Even after I came back, discharged from the Army, I went and got a job with the federal government in boarding school, take care of the little student. So that's what I did, and then later on I was re-signed by the government, employment and training. One place they sent me says they couldn't get enough recruit, but I built up recruiting. A lot of Navajos went on the training, but mostly trade training, learned the skill, auto mechanic, welding, iron worker, secretary, cooks, mortician, all kind of school. I sent many Navajos in different cities during the civilian after 1953. So I found my work and I stayed with it. I went through GS5, GS7, 9, 11, 12. About later, the end of time, 13 and 14, superintendent. So I went up the ranks. I do my job, what I was told to do according to regulations. So that's what I did in my work. It's not that hard. I found out being an administrator. Just follow the regulation, the United States government under Congress of the United States of America. So I work for the government, and I thank very much that there was employment for me. Thank you, the public. Also, I work with congressman from Arizona. I was working in Chinle, Arizona. I went and investigate Navajo Code Talker and national recognition. Now we have August, the day the Japanese signed surrender. That's the National Navajo Code Talker Day, nationwide. So they gave us a date, and I have a letter from Senator DeConcini Senator Domenici, Senator Cannon of Nevada and New Mexico. So I work with the congressional people. They're really good people. They recognize the Navajo Code Talkers, recognized by National Congress of the United States. So I want to thank all the leaders. Thank you, all the people that help us to keep peace. But there's always something somewhere. You never know what will happen. So at this time, I'm seeking gold for myself. I haven't received my gold. Every Native Code Talker in the United States, other than Navajo, received gold. And I want my gold. Those leaders, I want help. I ask for your help to get my gold. And I thank you very much for talking to you and the public.
Marine Corps hymn and Navajo.
Hmm?
Marine Corps hymn and Navajo.
I've seen Marine Corps in Navajo. No hoka na da yila da togon da de ka o ati do tas ka ke a togon da de ba ni ne kala ebene he da hoslen Dole tanta he ole the United States Marine. Oison con el teto anaco pique titling. Negesti tlinit ate ye olye ate. Anile kaila ebene da hosen on tanta he ole the United States Marine Poison con el teco go pique titling. Negesti trinidate, ye olieni she ate. Se laido toido dojo tatesi. Navajo nation bisi la go toila, pojon go kehati. Thank you, sir.
Wow. Mr. Begay, thank you for your service. Now, we have a very interesting next step to our conversation, and that is to talk to the journalist, Patty Talahongva, a Hopi journalist who has 3 decades of experience covering Native American affairs, from arts and education to health, crime, and politics. She is a founding member and former vice president of the Hopi Education Endowment Fund and was recently appointed by former U.S. Senator Brian Dorgan to sit on the advisory board for the Center for Native American Youth and the past president of the Native American Journalists Association. And it was actually Patty who helped us to get in touch with Mr. Begay to set this amazing conversation up. And Patty has invited me, so that you know, to sort of share in her conversation by sharing some of your questions. And so, Patty, as I open this up, the one consistent question is, can you clarify for the audience what is the gold that Mr. Begay is seeking, and what can people do to help that happen? So tell us about your documentary. Tell us about the Navajo Code Talkers.
Well, first, eskwili, sanga uma angka kya no kutsaku keng mana yan Hopi matsiwa, no pari Talahongva yan pahan matsiwa, no kaawangwa pup yupatki wangwa, no tsitsomobit angka. Good morning. I just wanted to say hello and greet you in my Hopi language. And my name is Patty Talahongva. My Hopi name is White Spider. I am from the village of First Mesa, Walpi, and also Sitsomovi. And my clan is Corn Clan and also Water Clan. And I just really want to thank you, Jane, Samuel, and Yanni, and the U.S. Capitol Historical Society for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank all the veterans in the audience who are watching. Thank you also for your service. And thank you to Mr. Begay for his service, and for all of the Navajo Code Talkers and all of the other Code Talkers from tribes that I will be telling you about today. And I have to also recognize my family and the service that we have had in the military. From my uncle, in Hopi we call our uncles Taha, my Taha Lyman Palaka, who served in the Navy, and his brother Lloyd, my Taha also Isidore Talashi, who served in the Marines, his daughter Tanya, his granddaughter Lexi, all Marines, and also uncles who served in the Air Force. I mean, we have a long history of service to this country in my family. And I have to say thank you also to my father-in-law, Malcolm Richards, who retired as a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. So thank you to all of the veterans, and we appreciate your service. And to answer your question, Jane, and to talk about what Mr. Begay was also mentioning, is that when I interviewed when I interviewed Frank Sinachi, who was Meskwaki Indian, and they live in Tama, Iowa. That is their traditional homelands. And he told me, and this is in the documentary, he told me that the governor kept wanting to give him buttons, recognition, a medal for his service. And he said, what am I going to do with these buttons? They don't do anything for me. What he was looking for was a wheelchair that was electrical, so his 65-year-old daughter didn't have to push him around. He was looking for help to fix his house. He was looking for that kind of financial assistance so that he could live a comfortable lifestyle, which he certainly earned. This man was a prisoner of war. He was captured during World War II, and he was one of the Meskwaki Code Talkers. So when you're looking at how do we compensate, or how do we recognize, that is the bottom line. A lot of these veterans who live on remote reservations rely on wood heating, wood stoves for winter. Again, my uncle I named off, we need to help him get some firewood. We need to help them fix their homes. So I've got so much to say, and I also want to encourage questions as we go into the presentation. So that's just kind of part of it. There are organizations that you can donate to help these veterans, sometimes directly to the tribes, but everyone is set up differently in their own unique way. But I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about where this service began, because Mr. Begay mentioned going to boarding school, and that's where it began. And that's where, the story of our people and our service to this country really starts. And it's not so much a service to the Constitution or the flag. It's because this is our homeland. And that's what every single Code Talker told me when I interviewed them. Their concern that their homeland was being invaded or could be invaded. And so that was the driving force to have them enlist in World War I. Now, they got their training at boarding schools. And a lot of people don't even know about the government policy that created boarding schools across the country. And, the first boarding school was opened in late, like 1881, Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. And these boarding schools were the brainchild of Henry Pratt, who was an officer in the Army. And so being a military man, he set up the boarding schools like military bases. So those kids in those early years had to wear uniforms, their hair was cut, they were marched everywhere, they had to become Christian, and everything about them was changed in terms of language, religion, culture, food, everything. And these are little kids who were, as some of them told me, they were being turned into little white boys, little white kids. That was the effort to assimilate us as Native people into European American culture. And because of that, they were raised in this very strict military environment. And so when World War I broke out, boys from all of these boarding schools enlisted, even though we were not yet considered US citizens. That did not come until after the war, when Congress passed the Indian Citizenship Act in 1924. So just this year, Memorial Hall, which is in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's in Steele Indian School Park, which is a city park now, but that area used to be the grounds of the Phoenix Indian Industrial School. And in later years, it was changed to the Phoenix Indian School, the name changed. And then the school operated for 99 years, from 1891 to 1990. And so just think of the generations who went through that school. And of course, things changed through time, at the boarding schools. Things weren't so harsh. They didn't have to wear military uniforms. I went to school there. But again, this history, and really understand that my grandparents went to boarding school. That generation was told, you can't be Indian. And, the language was you were punished if you were caught speaking your native language. And yet the same government came back to the tribes and said, can you create a code in your language to save us in World War I? And the Choctaws, the Cheyennes, Cherokees, Comanches, Ho-Chunks, Osage, and Yankton Sioux people, those are the tribes that we know are documented to serve as code talkers in World War I. And again, it's like, this is so crazy that our relationship with the US government. In World War II, of course, I think there were about a little more than 20 tribes who served as code talkers. And I was very fortunate to have the honor to produce the documentary for the National Museum of the American Indian, which is in Washington, DC. And and the intention was this would be a traveling exhibition. And so we went across the country and we interviewed code talkers. And that's when I met Frank Senachi. And we went to Tama, Iowa. We went to his home, and we knew that he had been a POW for most of the war. And his family said, well, he doesn't really talk about it, but see what, he'll tell you. And so as we got set up, I just visited with him, and his family was sitting, we were in the living room, and his family was in the next room in the kitchen. And I just said, tell me what happened to you. And he talked for the next 90 minutes and told me stories about all of the horrible atrocities. In fact, he said, and I put this in the documentary, he said, the things they did to him as a POW, they have no words in his language to describe that treatment. It was horrendous. He knew, that his health had been affected. And so that's why he was advocating for more veterans benefits. And I think veterans everywhere will say, we do need more benefits, more for the people to take care of them after their service. So anyhow, but we also had the opportunity to go to Oklahoma, and we met Charles Chibody, one of the Comanche code talkers, funny man. And that's what I loved about speaking to these code talkers, because across the board, and you talk to natives, and we have a great sense of humor. And these young boys at the time when they were serving, they kept their sense of humor through all this tragedy, all this, everything they were put through, the pressure they had to create these codes and figure out what do we do. And Charles Chibody talked about how they named Hitler, and he said, they called Hitler the crazy old white man, our enemy. And he said that they, just would have a lot of fun, just even in those intense war times. Hopi Code Talkers and Navajo Code Talkers told me that sometimes somebody would get a letter from home, and they would tell their superiors, we have to test the wire, test the radio line. And they'd say, oh, okay. So they'd get on the radio, and they would read the letters, they would give the information from home and share that with the other code talkers. And that way they, I think, kept their sanity. And they also teased each other. They would get a letter from home, or somebody would make up a story and tell another code talker, hey, I hear your girlfriend is going out with some other guy back home. And that would cause all this, uproar. But they had a way to stay stable and under intense conditions. Hopi Code Talkers told me that there was a colonel, and he was arrogant and mean, and everybody was afraid of this man. And you know how they have their eagle wings on their pinned to their chest. So they decided to call him Goaka, which in Hopi that means chicken. And so they called him Chicken Wings, whenever they were describing, oh, that guy is coming around. And it was their own private joke, and nobody knew what they were saying. So again, how did they find ways to cope being in that environment? We have a long history of service in Indian country, and it comes back to the boarding school. It also goes back to just this idea of we can't go to war with the US, but we can defend our homeland. So much to talk about, and I want to make sure we get to some of the questions. And so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll be glad to address them as the best as I can. When we did the documentary for NMAI, it was intended, like I said, to be a traveling exhibition. And we worked on that in 2004, and I think it went live in about 2007. And the museum received so many requests to put up the exhibit and to show it. They ended up making a duplicate exhibit, and both exhibitions were crisscrossing the country because people had never heard of so many code talkers. They hadn't heard this history. And we don't teach it in our public schools. And even when you get to college, you have to dig around for courses that talk about American Indian history and our service in the military. Mr. Begay was talking about the TBX radio, and some of the code talkers told me that was the radio they had to, carry. It's a big, bulky backpack, and as they were marching, one code talker told me that that feeling never went away because the radio would hit his back, and that thump, thump, thump. He would feel it even years after the war. He could feel that motion on his back, and he could hear that sound. And so those lasting memories of trying to deliver messages, in encrypted messages, and then trying to run from one place to the next. And they talked about the Japanese having direction finders, and so they're pinpointed on the map, where's your location? So they had to quickly send a code and then break down and run, because they would get fired on if they didn't move fast enough. And a lot of these young men, lied about their age. I think that happened everywhere. But they said they were 17, but they were not. They were 15, and enlisted in the military. So it's just you think about this history and you think about the service, and it's profound that we don't have more information of this readily available. Memorial Hall, I mentioned at the Phoenix Indian School, turned 100 years old. And this year, it was built in 1922 to honor the boys who served in the First World War. And in front, there's a bronze plaque, and it has the names of all the boys who served and the 2 boys who were killed in action. And so a couple of things happened after World War I because of the service overall of Native Americans in the military, and then the service of the Code Talkers. Congress passed the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. And then in before that, 1922, Memorial Hall was built, and the students helped build that memorial to the World War I veterans. And even though we gained citizenship in 1924, it took years, a couple of decades later, before Native Americans got the right to vote in Arizona. So it's just, you think about history and you consider everything that is involved in things that we don't know and don't teach. It's kind of crazy. In World War II, another veteran from the Phoenix Indian School was Ira Hayes. And Ira Hayes, I know that probably most of the people on this webinar today don't know the name, but I guarantee you've seen his photo because you've all seen the picture of the flag raising at Iwo Jima. Okay, so this is a book that really traces the story of Ira Hayes. And Ira is the last man with his hands up. And he was Pima Indian from the Gila River Indian community. And he was the man pictured here. There's something, hanging out of his back belt loop there. But Ira Hayes helped identify this man in the front.
Ira Hayes,
and Ira Hayes was misidentified during the initial public relations release when the military sent the families to honor them and to
we have
recognize them for their work.
About 5 Navajos up there with the 8th Marine. It's a green beach. I was over on the other side, Red Beach 2. We all watched the flag raising down, kind of slope down, Serbachi. We're on the high top. Yeah, that's where Ara is, one of them. We're all in there, Navajos. They got 5 Navajos up there, like Teddy Draper, George James, other George Chosin, and the other, some of us are on the east side, was 7th, 27th Regiment. That's where I was, replaced 2 Code Talker and the wounded 1, so they sent me out, and I stayed with them outfit until 38 days. I don't know why they were the last one to leave, but I became ill. I was hospitalized on USS Storm King. So that's what happened to me. I don't know. Something happened. I got sick.
Do you know Ira Hayes? Did you know Ira Hayes?
Yeah, I know Ira Hayes. We all know one another, all the Code Talkers. There was about 32 of us assigned to 5th Marine Division. Each unit they have a Navajo. But we lost 2, wounded, about 3 or 4 others in different units.
Oh, is that? Thank you. I said thank you to
Thank
my
you
dad.
very much
Okay,
for
thank you.
the interview, and I appreciate releasing the news, and that's the way I feel today. Because thank you very much, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oui,
Patty, can we ask-
Mr. Begay.
Mr. Begay, you are remarkable. Now, Patty, can we ask you a few questions?
Sure.
Apparent from your conversation, the idea of code talking was first developed in the First World War and then used more extensively in the Second World War. Is that, the actual history as you described it?
Yes.
And and there were multiple different tribes that
Yes.
used their different languages, which was one of the values of it, because it was very confusing to the folks who were trying to give the United States trouble.
And not only to you know, our enemies, but even as a Hopi, you know, if I listened, you know, if a Hopi listened to the conversation, it wouldn't make sense, because some of them, the code talkers said, it sounded like we were ordering breakfast or something, because across the board, the word egg was used to describe bombs. And so if you wanted to describe a smaller bomb, you would pick a smaller bird's egg. Larger bombs were eagle eggs. And as Mr. Begay mentioned, the word for tank was used, they used the word turtle to describe, because a turtle has a hard shell and moves slowly. So across the board, they came up with similar words to describe whatever they needed, because these words were not in our traditional languages. And one of the Navajo Code Talkers told me he had been called to the radio by his commanding officer and said, I think you're getting a message. And they heard some language being spoken. And this man lived close to the Hopi reservation. And he listened and he said, oh, that's not Navajo, that's Hopi. And he said, and Hopi speak slowly. So he could tell, you know, that, oh, they're speaking Hopi, but he didn't know what they were saying. And even if he could speak Hopi, and a lot of people spoke other, you know, tribal languages, he wouldn't understand, because it was coded within that. So one of the Navajo Code Talkers told me that the word hill, they used, the first letter was H, and so they said horse, and then they took ILL, and that means ill, right? You're sick. So they turned the word hill into sick horse. And well, how could you figure out that if you didn't understand the code? And again, none of these codes were ever broken. A couple of other things I wanted to mention, or did you have another question before I go on?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Another question was about whether or not they had guards that were ordered to shoot them or whatever. We have not verified any of that, so I don't think that was true. And in fact, a couple of Navajo Code Talkers told me that they had gone down to a river or someplace to kind of bathe and clean up, and they were captured by American forces. And they told them, no, we're Americans. And the soldiers didn't believe them, because again, you know, people say natives look Asian, Asians look native. So there was some confusion, like maybe the enemy infiltrated us, took the uniforms, and they're pretending to be one of us, and then they're going to come in and kill us. And so the Code Talkers thought real fast, and they said, take us to your commander, and we'll prove it. And so they did. They marched them back at gunpoint. And then when the commanding officer saw that the Code Talkers were being held at gunpoint, they said, put your guns down. These guys are us.
Wow.
And another Code Talker told me that he believed that he was spared in the war, because as the Japanese looked through their binoculars and they could see him, he said, we look like each other, and they didn't want to shoot what maybe they thought, you know, was somebody from their own country, their own bloodline. And he said, people around me were getting shot. He said, but I never got shot. So, you know, it was interesting to hear about their experience. The big thing too about no jobs, many of them told me that after they served in the war, and again, you know, they came back and they still didn't have the right to vote. They still were discriminated against. And so they came back and, you know, had a really hard life. A lot of them became alcoholics or had issues with alcohol, because that was the culture of the military. You know, have a drink at the end of the day. That's not a part of any Native culture. Happy hour, this idea of, you know, sit down and have a drink. So that was really hard for them to deal with. And so, you know, it's just, we have so much history to share and to learn. And I encourage everyone to go to the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. They just dedicated a sculpture there last week on Veterans Day, and it's for American Indian veterans. And again, if you're in Phoenix, Arizona, you can go right to Memorial Hall. The city of Phoenix rents it out. So if you are an organization, you can actually rent that out. And so there are places you can go and hear and see and understand this history.
And just for everybody's information, this webinar is being recorded, and everyone who has registered will get a note and access to the webinar. We will also provide a link to the documentary that you made, Patty, because it is something that is so well done and it's really worthy. Several people have asked, how could we access that? And the other thing, if you can share with us, we can share with our listeners that there are some folks who are interested in making contributions to organizations that are assisting Native American veterans in particular. And so we'll share those in the follow-up. We are, past our traditional time, but the experience that we have is so unique to be able to talk to one of 3 remaining code talkers. And so we are just honored, Mr. Begay, that you could be with us. And Patty, that you would make the time to be with us and talk with us. I know that you are currently an active journalist and you've been, busy with the elections. And do you want to just give us a little bit of current news? There was a Native American whose election you were following very closely in Arizona.
Oh, yes. In California, actually.
California, okay.
I followed the election of James Ramos, and he is the former chairman of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. He was elected in 2018 to the California State Assembly, and he's the first California Native American to serve in the Assembly. And he won that election. He won re-election in 2020. And then this last year, his district was redrawn. And so he ran for a seat in a newly created district, and he won that. So that was James Ramos. But we're still waiting to hear about the election of Mary Peltola in Alaska. And we're following the races. Sharice Davids got reelected in Kansas. Yes, lots of election news. And another big story that we're following, and again, this is part of history that you just don't often hear about, is that in the treaty for the Cherokee Nation, they have an actual designation to have a Cherokee citizen sit in Congress, sit in the House of Representatives. So Kim Teehee has been the person designated for that. And just this week, the chief of the Cherokee Nation had testified, and Congress is looking at making that happen pretty soon. So, and it's not just the Cherokee Nation, but I think there are 5 other tribes that have that designation in their treaties. So these are this will be representation that's not there. I mean, we have Native Americans serving in the House of Representatives and now the Senate, but certainly not enough. So anytime you have that voice at the table, it really opens up the conversation as to what are the needs and what are the priorities when it comes to serving Indian country. And I think the pandemic really brought that out, because for so many people living on reservations, it's really hard because they don't have good internet connectivity, and the distances are so far. Multiple generations live in one house. And so, there's so many issues with that. So yes, there's no end to the number of stories that we can cover.
Well, let me just tell you that the United States Capitol Historical Society is dedicated to bringing the story of history that has not been told, particularly as it relates to Congress, as it relates to the activities of the issues that come before the Congress, which certainly covers all of the veterans matters. And so as we look ahead to 2024, which will be the 100th anniversary of Native Americans being recognized as citizens, we intend to continue to tell that story, and we look forward to working with you. We are past our time, but it was worth every moment of it. And we thank you, Patty, Mr. Begay, we thank you, and Ron, we thank you in the background helping your dad.
Thank you.
And we will have this recorded, and it will be available on our website. And we hope that you will join us in some other programming and share with us ideas that you have about programming that you would like us to pursue. As you know, for those of you who are reliable listeners, the United States Capitol Historical Programs are only available because of the support from our viewers, our watchers, and the people who donate and become members. And so we are so grateful to each and every one of you. And as you come to your end of the year giving, if you can find a few little shekels for the Capitol Historical Society, we would be honored to continue to provide these programs. Patty, Mr. Begay, Ron in the background, thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Esquily.
Bye. Ada. Date. Salute. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.